Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about a classic science fiction movie from these 50 years ago, I think. It's called Zardoz. It was written and directed by John Boorman of Deliverance fame. It was actually supposed to be starring Burt Reynolds from Deliverance, but apparently he couldn't do the movie, so it is starring Sean Connery, looking like Burt Reynolds with like a Burt Reynolds mustache. Kind of funny. This is one of those movies that I think everyone should see if you're interested in cinema, and especially science fiction cinema, because it's referenced so heavily in other things. It's good to at least see it one time to know what all the fuss is about or why so many people found it compelling. It's referenced in lots of comedy shows like Rick and Morty and Futurama and things like that, especially this giant floating head that we see at various points in the movie. Now, before I go further, I was tipped to make this movie. Someone paid me to make this video, to do this analysis of this movie, which I'm happy to do. I hadn't really thought about Zardoz in quite some time, so it was fun to go back and watch it and take a little bit deeper look at what's going on in this movie. So approaching this analysis is challenging because Zardoz is a movie that's about ideas, about big ideas. But it is still a movie. It's a storytelling medium, and it has all the production elements of a movie. So you really have to look at those production elements and evaluate them because they affect how the audience is going to interpret the big ideas. And so you can kind of guess by that intro that a lot of the production elements, a lot of the technical choices in the movie, I'm not super fond of. So let me go through some of the criticisms of the movie on a technical level before I get to talk about the ideas and how John Boorman actually executed them. I will say as a note that there is a novelization of Zardoz that John Boorman did. I haven't read it. It maybe explains especially the event sequence in the movie better, or maybe goes deeper into some of the ideas that are there. Like I said, it's a movie about big ideas, and honestly there's too many ideas to really cram in the movie, and that can be almost overwhelming and confusing if you're not paying careful attention or if you're only just watching the movie one time. So let me start with some technical things. So the music is really good. It's a really weird and interesting score that blends like classical music with a whole bunch of other things. It's a very unique score, and I actually really think the soundtrack works for what's there. There's a big part of this movie that I think doesn't work, and that is the costume design. The costume design is just bizarre and really distracting and off-putting. Sean Connery's character, Zed, I think, he is wearing this like red suspenders over this diaper looking thing, and he's got these big thigh-high boots, and he's holding a revolver all the time and riding on horseback and shooting people with a revolver. And the whole aesthetic of those things, the little gun and the weird big boots and riding on horses, and he's got this braided ponytail thing and the Burt Reynolds mustache, it's just so weird. It's such a weird choice for what's there, and it doesn't make me think of future. It doesn't make me think of future dystopia. It just makes me think of, like, I don't know, someone got really high in the 70s and bought some random stuff at some kind of like fashion store and put it on and said that's our costume for the movie. The other costumes in the movie are likewise baffling and super cheap looking. They're all handmade. I don't know if they look handmade. I don't know if they actually are handmade. I think the production, like, they had people hand make all of these costumes. These are the costumes that the Eternals, the main characters that you're focusing on, are wearing. And it looks like somebody crocheted them or knitted them together, and they're not wearing any underwear. So they're very revealing in a weird way, where they not only do they like reveal the contours of the body or like expose parts of the female body in particular we're not really used to seeing exposed, but you can see through them a little bit, which is uncomfortable. So, and there's a ton of nudity besides this. There's women just not wearing shirts, and that kind of goes with the ideas that Boorman is exploring here. But I will say to anybody that's thinking of watching this movie, if you find like really gratuitous amounts of nudity off-putting, this is probably going to be an off-putting movie. I actually can't think of another movie that's just like R-rated that has more nudity than Zardoz. And it's all incidental. It's like they're in this weird room and there's like remade bodies floating around and they're all nude. So there's just like nude bodies everywhere. There's women who just don't wear shirts most of the time. And then when they do wear shirts, they're like weird crocheted shirts that you can see see their body through in strange ways. It's a very, very strange choice, but they look cheap and they fit on the characters in an awkward and ugly way. I don't know what they were thinking with the costumes, but they don't work, and they don't really work with the sets either. The sets, I believe it was shot all in Ireland, which may have been a production problem, but the empty fields of the Brutals are in Ireland. They're just like some hills in Ireland, and then the place where the Eternals live just looks like some abandoned like farm manor. And it's like here's some old farm buildings of concrete and wood, and they just look really bad. Like the sets look really bad for the most part, other than the very obviously science fiction sets, like the sets that were maybe made in a soundstage. The outdoor sets and buildings just look like completely incongruous to the main ideas that are there in the movie. And so that's a big problem, is that the movie just doesn't look very good with its set design and its costumes. It's a big, I think, barrier to what could have been there. And then, there's no special effects really, other than like this floating head, where special effects might have been really helpful, where there's like, a force field and you have the characters kind of going. This was pre-Star Wars. There wasn't as much emphasis on special effects coming out of like the 50s and 60s, where there was, a lot of kind of 3D movies and stuff. That just wasn't the emphasis on this. And I went back and I found some old reviews of it, and they mentioned that they liked the effects, that they liked the visual effects, but most of them don't really hold up by today's standards. So just be aware of that as well if you're watching. I don't think it detracts really from the story. You work within the limitations that you have, and like I said, the emphasis is on the ideas. So with that in mind, let's talk about the big ideas that are here and how those are explored through the story. So one of the problems that you have with mid-century sci-fi, which this fits in nicely too, is that the focus on science fiction after about 1950 is on these big ideas. It's kind of speculative fiction. What if things were like this? How would that look? And that's a great starting place. However, that itself is not a story. So in order for a book or a movie to be compelling, there has to be a story. There has to be characters, and there has to be plot in addition to the big ideas, which is the setting. And in this case, John Boorman has so many big ideas, and they have such a big impact, and he wants to explore them in such a deep way that there's not that much room for story. So he does something very clever, and I don't disapprove of this. This is not a criticism. This is a way to solve that problem, which is he formats most of the movie as a mystery. That is to say, we have characters who are, especially the main character of Zed, who is exploring this utopia, dystopia society and uncovering truths about it, which the audience will hopefully find interesting. That itself are not, so we have plot events that are just revealing pieces of information we need to know, revealing context we need to know to understand the events. And so by formatting it that way, there's enough story tension going through everything that we're pulled along, even though there's not a lot of event, right? There's not very many plot events throughout most of the movie. There's one big one, kind of the inciting incident for the mystery of the rest of the movie up to the third act. But other than that, things are actually at a standstill as far as things changing. It's more like Zed or the Eternals, they're uncovering truths. So the big ideas here is really, and we've seen this with a couple of other 1970s movies like Logan's Run, utopia that's really dystopia. And in fact, if we compare this movie to Logan's Run, you can see why I would be really critical of the sets and the costumes in Zardoz, because you can look at Logan's Run and it's just beautiful, like beautiful sets, great costumes, everything gels together with the main ideas. In this case, the big ideas don't gel with the costumes. So the idea is there's been some sort of collapse of civilization, and there's this group of people that call themselves the Eternals. And they live kind of in a hippie commune kind of area. They're surrounded by force fields. And everybody who lives outside in the like maybe post-nuclear wastes or whatever, they're the Brutals. They call them the Brutals. And the Eternals look at them as like unevolved animals. They look at them as beasts. So there's interest to them, but they don't even view them as human. They're like non-human creatures that are out there and not allowed to come in. The Eternals live forever, and they live forever in a way that is unavoidable for them. So that is, if their body dies, then their consciousness just gets transferred into a new body. So they're, as you uncover things, they're also ruled over by a computer, like a computer AI that manages all of this stuff for them. Will regrow them a body and put their consciousness back into the new body. So even if they were trying to escape their life through death, they just get reincarnated with all their memories intact, so they never really die. And so, of course, the main conflict there is that they want to die. And this is explored in the very first scene. So Boorman does a really funny job where he shows this guy with a painted-on mustache say, "I am Zardoz, and I long to die." So that's the big conflict, is that many of the Eternals want the release of death, that eternal life is actually a suffering. It's hell. It's not heaven to them. And so that's the big central idea, and that's the idea that I think deserves the most focus and gets the most focus in the movie. There's other ideas there too that are a lot of story algebra for, like, how can this exist? Well, there's a computer that does it. And then we have flashback scenes of people like renouncing their ability to die and taking on these burdens. And then what do you do when people don't want to play by the rules? Well, they get punished. And what's the only punishment if you can't die? It's to be older. So you end up with the Eternals kind of divided into three groups. One is the ones who are still themselves, I guess. And then there's people who are old. They have old bodies and they're demented. They have like dementia and they're trapped in those old bodies forever. That's their punishment for rebelling against this AI that rules over them. And then you have the apathetics, which are these people who just have kind of given up on life. And even if they were to let their body waste away, the AI will just grow them a new body and put their completely apathetic consciousness back into it. And this also creates some small problems for the people trying to manage this utopia, in that you now have two growing segments of people who don't contribute to the growing of food, like this utopian project that's there. So they start to look outside. Well, can we make these brutals grow food? And so is something that gets revealed. But honestly, it doesn't really matter that much to the big idea. It's just kind of something that goes along with everything that's there. The main goal of Zardoz and actually several Eternals is to die. And so how do you die if you're just going to be reborn into another body with all of your same memories intact? You're trapped forever in hell. Well, you have to come up with some sort of plot. And so as we go through the movie, we start to understand that their plot was to bring in a brutal who was capable of destroying this AI, this tabernacle. And so once they destroy that computer, then they'll be able to die, and there won't be anyone there to regrow their body and put their consciousness back into another flesh prison. That's their plot, and that's basically what happens. But at the same time, there's extra ideas that Boorman throws in there, which is like this idea of sex. So the Eternals are impotent. They can't achieve erections and they don't reproduce, right? There's no need to reproduce, so their sexual desire goes away. There's kind of a deep idea there that Boorman just kind of throws into the mix of this movie, which is that without, completely divorced from its purpose, sex has no meaning and therefore isn't even desirable to them anymore. When it's divorced from its purpose, procreation, completely divorced. And you have to think, in the 1970s, a lot of these ideas might have been new, right? Like birth control had only been around a little while, right? The idea of having sex outside of its normal procreative result it's not like a novel idea. It's like cultures have had that forever. But the idea that you could just meaningfully choose to never have children, was still pretty novel. So to kind of throw this in the movie and be like, people will just lose their sexual desire when it's completely separated from the procreative act. And so some of the Eternals wake up to this, and then they feel desire. They feel desire to have children. They feel desire to procreate. And by feeling desire to procreate and wanting to be able to procreate, suddenly they gain sexual desire as well. They gain, especially the women, they gain this ability to have sexual desire. The men never gain it. So you have a kind of a funny fantasy where the Zed character ends up inseminating like all these different women. He has sex with a bunch of women so they can have children. And then one of them, the one who's been trying to kill him through most of the movie, ends up kind of deciding that she loves him, and so they go off and have a kid together. And so the final scenes are like him and the woman like rotting away to skeletons, dying, and having a child who then carries on past them. So thus they've returned to the natural state of humanity and grown and died and reproduced and brought things back into the circle of life. So those big ideas end up asking a lot of questions and making a lot of claims that I think are where the real interest of the movie is at. So one of them is that, eternal life is hell. That is, eternal life in our fallen bodies is a hellish experience. That these Eternals who are constantly in communion, they're able to telepathically link with each other with these crystals in their head. It's hell, and they want to have an escape from it. They want to have a release from it, because we're fallen, we're sinful. So that is part of it. And then you can see that this separates them into two areas. One is the more extreme hellish experience of not only are you forever alive, but your body is also decaying, right? And it'd be interesting to think about setting up the society. It's like, how do we punish people who live forever? It's like the only way we can punish them is by degrading the body. So we degrade the body by making it old. So your existence becomes more hellish, and you rebel more against the hell that you're on. You get punished by having your physical existence and your mental existence become even more hellish through dementia and through the degradation of aging that happens to all of us. So it's an indignity to aging, and it's a punishment. Aging is a punishment from there, rather than as the natural process of getting old and dying, right? And then so the people who are apathetic, they simply just disengage. They're not rebelling against it. There's nothing to punish them for because they're not doing anything. So their resistance is really to just stop engaging and stop really being alive, to attempt to be dead by being completely still is the other thing that's there. How are these things corrected? Well, Zed corrects all of the problems that exist in this false utopia. Zed ends up correcting through his vitality as a human being. You find out he's been sort of selectively bred to do his job. That's, to me, not that important for like the main ideas, which is that Zed is very violent. And in this peace-loving utopia society where people are able to like psychically attack each other and they don't actually do any physical violence, he brings the vitality of physical violence into it. And so that vitality of physical violence stirs people to move and also gives him the power to destroy the tabernacle and to harm other people, to bring in his fellow hunters, which their whole job is they're exterminators. They just go out and kill random brutals, to bring them in to kill the Eternals, right? That's like his whole plan as we start to uncover that. So his cunning, his ability to be violent, his ability to be sexual solves the problem of their apathetic view towards sexuality and sensuality. They don't enjoy their senses until there's a purpose to them. They can't enjoy even touch until there's a final purpose for it, which would be reproduction. So he solves that problem. He solves the problem of the old people. They have to go to one of the old people who was one of the founders of this weird utopia to get answers about how to solve the problem of destroying the AI. So that in turn is a bringing back to the correct alignment of everything, what old people are supposed to do. Old people are supposed to be wise and instruct the young and teach them things and tell them how to solve their problems. And so once Zed is able to go there and actually do that, that restores the humanity of the older people, just as him being able to restore their capacity to die will also restore their humanity. So it fixes the problem of they're so apathetic they can't even have sex and they have no desire for it because it's been completely separated from the vitality of life. And then they view aging as this horrible, punishable, hellish thing rather than as a natural thing which has a purpose to the society to help other people right? Through experience, through wisdom, through things like that. He kind of restores the balance. And he even stirs the apathetic people to motion as well, because they have a reason they have someone to hate at the end, right? Everyone ends up chasing him. So even the apathetic start to get stirred by the thought of violence, by the thought of motion, by the thought of even maybe sexuality. All of these things that are divorced from the utopian state of these Eternals are brought back in. So the utopia as dystopia, I think, is really the main thrust of Zardoz. I think a lot of people focus on the floating head being a false god. That's what I tend to see other people talking about. And that's part of it, right? That's part of what enrages Zed, is that his god is false. But it's the person who's running the god, who's pretending to be Zardoz, who basically reveals Zardoz is from Wizard of Oz, that it's a false god, and teaches him, to hate him, so that Zed will come in and destroy the Eternals and allow him to die, right? It's a big plot. How do you die if you can't die? Well, you have to have someone else with the capacity to do all of these violent things and all of these vital human things to destroy the inhumanity that is the Eternals. The Eternals think of themselves as better, but they completely lack any vitality. They don't grow. They don't reproduce. They don't add any artwork. So they've collected all of this great history of artwork of humans, throughout history. They don't add to it at all. They simply just exist. And so, of course, they're in hell. They don't have a purpose to anything that they're doing. Their existence was to preserve art. That's not a purpose unto yourself. That's merely like a conservation. And they don't even care about that in the end, right? They're not artisans. They're not making art. They're not bringing humanity forward. They view themselves as like the resting point, the pinnacle of humanity. And being a human in a body, that is actually a hellish experience. That's I think that's the big idea to take away from here. Now, how does that fit in with the story? Well, like I said, it's a mystery story. So you're uncovering all these details about how things work as you go. You have characters bringing Zed around and like evaluating him and seeing what arouses him by showing him porn. There's little porno clips in the movie. Like I said, there's a lot of nudity. It's really over the top in some cases. They're doing all this stuff to like examine him like an animal, but really he's there to be human. And so all of those little revelations, they serve to keep the forward momentum of the movie, keep a little bit of story tension to figure out, why is he there? Why did he kill this guy? What's his goal? And then all that's uncovered going into the third act. Then you have this really chaotic third act where there's just bunches of stuff happening. You have people trying to hunt him down. You have like this weird time freeze thing. You discover the AI inside this crystal. You have a bunch of really quick expositional dialogue to explain things, and then you try to wrap it all up with a nice little bow. Really, the third act needed quite a bit more time to explore all the ideas and to wrap everything up, bring everything together so you could have a proper release for the story. But overall, I think the ideas shine through the flaws of Zardoz. And so if you're looking at it as an example of mid-century or say second half of the 20th century science fiction, exploring big ideas and their consequences, a bit of speculative fiction in the realm of science fiction, then I think it's a really good movie to watch. And I think it is one of those movies that maybe everyone should watch. I think it's technically very flawed for a lot of the reasons that I talked about, but like I said, it's about the big idea. So maybe the novelization would be really good, or maybe it'd be good if somebody were to like add better effects into it. Maybe it'd be better if it was just in a different format where you could fully have the imagination that's there, like an animated movie or a comic or something like that, where you weren't limited by shooting on like Irish farmland sets and things like that. So I don't know. I think it's one of those classic canonical science fiction movies. I don't think it's great, but I think the ideas are interesting. And there's one more idea that I would talk about, which I bet most people aren't thinking of, which is that if you are in your new body, are you you? Well, it never really deals with this. It just assumes you is something up here, as some consciousness, where you really are, the Eternals really are imprisoned in a flesh body. They're imprisoned in a body of flesh that isn't even theirs. There's also some weird unexplained things in the movies. You see some of the bodies in like plastic, and you're like, why are they there and not somewhere else, right? They're there to look cool, maybe. Most of the time, you get decent explanations for how things work, but sometimes things just get glossed over in the movie because there's a few too many ideas for the amount of time that John Boorman takes to explore all of them. So anyway, if you've seen Zardoz, leave me your thoughts down below, down in the comment section. I'd love to hear them and to see what you guys think about this classic movie. That's my big thought. It really is about the ideas, and through that you could forgive a lot of the issues with production, the sets, the costumes, which are really weird and I think not very good for the story that's being told. I don't know. You tell me what you think about it. Do the ideas shine through the production, which is kind of what I think, or is it just one of those really silly, weird 70s movies that we should just look at and laugh and move on with our life with? So let me know what you think down below. I'd be happy to read those, and I will see you all next time. Don't forget to hop on my Patreon. You get a free book every month if you're on Patreon or Ko-Fi, all of those. So that'll be all linked down below in the comment section. So have a great one, and I'll see you all next time.